Yeah, bro. It's just another day in the market today, really, for us. But it's gonna be like looking at the charts here. It's gonna be, I'll say, a bit more difficult. I say this every day probably, but like today, it's gonna be a bit more difficult due to the fact that like we haven't moved yet. And so you know how yesterday like it was a little difficult, but it was different because you already had the volume, right? Yes, it was difficult in terms of like finding direction, and you see how and like you can kind of see like what I meant yesterday, right? I told you guys yesterday, like I'm like, hey, even if you don't get anything from today's trades, or even if you don't get anything today, just understand how we were able to understand that price was gonna be a little difficult in terms of being this range before breaking out and finding its direction. Right, so I explained it to you guys. I mentioned to you guys how like, yeah, yesterday, like, you know, you're gonna move, but like the hardest part about today is figuring out what happens here in this range. Once that is figured out, it should be a pretty straightforward direction, and that's what the buys came afterwards was, right? But the key takeaway from yesterday was understanding like when to hunt and when not to hunt, right? And yesterday was like a perfect example of that. So today it's like it's a bit difficult, not in terms of like it's difficult, more difficult than yesterday, because yesterday you had volume, but you didn't have direction. Today you have no volume yet, and you have no direction yet. So you have two things that you kind of gotta wait for, right? So I don't know when the volume's gonna come. I don't know what time that will be. I'm not sure if it will be, you know, this hour, the next hour, kind of the 4-hour close, NYC open. All I know is that you don't have any news today, and yeah, you have no news that will directly impact price, which is fine. There's been plenty of days where you move without news, and you move quite a bit without news. But looking at the way things are, I wouldn't assume it's gonna be an algo day. I'll say it's more of like a standard day. So I mean, let's get to the analysis and let's do it and see what's up. But you know, hopefully we end up moving during the NYC open or something. But it's a chill day though, I'll say. Okay, so all right, let me just turn this off. All right, yo. So, starting off with, what do you guys want to start off with? The monthly? I mean, we always start the monthly. Why am I even asking? Starting off with the monthly time frame, chat. It shows us that we are currently sitting, I'll say, why does my chair feel different today? All right, there we go. We are currently sitting. So the monthly, it's coming down, right? You're coming down for a bottom wick. There's been like signs of rejections. Like I think yesterday was the low. Oh no, was it yesterday? What day did we create the low on? Yeah, it was yesterday. Yesterday was the low for the monthly. That was the lowest we've gone yesterday. And you can kind of see the levels we rejected off of, right? We had a target level on the monthly to be at like 1993. Well, not really a target. I'll say more so of, and there's a huge difference, right? Not really a target, but more of like the next step according to what price may print next. So not really a target. It's more so of like, if price were to do so, this will lead to price doing so and so, right? And the bigger picture that we had for the monthly was that we're bullish, and we're bullish to drive up towards the next monthly wick fill. Why? It's pretty straightforward. Just because you kind of closed above like this range to the left here. So if you closed above this range here, right, I would assume that that is enough. For some reason, I was gonna say energy. That is enough volume for you to drive up towards the top of the range here, right? So like you're closing above here, and you're doing what these candles to the left here have never done before. And by the candles to the left, I'm talking about these candles highlighted in pink. These candles to the left over here, rejection there. You can kind of see, right? All these candles at one given point, yeah, you guys have to understand, even though it shows huge rejections at some given point, these are all bullish closures, right? Or these are all bullish candles. At some given point, all of these candles look the same way these candles looked. They were just bullish, and they looked like they were going to close above, but they never did, right? So that's why like this closure is so powerful, just because this is the first time we've ever closed above the range, and that's why the direction is more straightforward than it were to be in the past, in terms of it's more bullish this time around than it was when it came up the last times, right? So this is like the fourth time coming up. Obviously, you close above the range, which indicates that we're closing above this range. We're sitting in the range of here, right? This is the range you're currently sitting in. Therefore, I would assume that you'll fill the range. Now, the problem, or not the problem, but the next step is figuring out whether or not we'll come down to form bottom wick or not, right? So usually I would assume we would, because 80% of candles would form bottom wicks, right? So I would assume we would, but just because you assume you would doesn't mean it always would. In this case, it did though. It came down and it created a bottom wick at, well, it came down towards 2017. Now, I think the next support is like 2000, right? And that was the idea behind like, or that was kind of where I wanted price to tap into before pushing up again. Again, it's only like 9 days into the monthly, so you have like 21 days left into the monthly. The monthly can do anything until then, but I would assume that like if this is a bottom wick, then price should be able to drive up to the top of the range, towards 2150, so towards all-time highs again. But the hard part is figuring out like whether or not this is the bottom wick or not, or if this is enough of a bottom wick, or will we drive further down, right? And the only way to kind of figure that out is by dropping down to a smaller time frame. So like the weekly, daily, that'll play a huge impact, because it's like a story, right? One chapter leads to another chapter. So the chapters in this case would be the time frames. You have the monthly as a chapter, the weekly as a chapter, the daily as a chapter, 4 hours a chapter, and so forth, right? All these are chapters, and if you could use the rest of the chapters to tell the story on the monthly, that will give you a better story to tell, right? So we'll figure that out later in terms of whether or not this is the bottom wick or not. Again, like that's the only way to do so. But in terms of the overall monthly projections though, it still shows you that like this is your support. So at any given point, you can still come down towards the 2000 mark before pushing up again, right? But yeah, we are starting to reject there, which is a good thing. It's not a bad thing at all. And if that's what's happening, could this be a start of the bullish run? Could this be a start of the bullish flip, right? If so, then great. You know, obviously we're not going to push all the way up today, but like if this is a start, then it could lead to next week being better, or maybe like Friday being better, etc. Right? So yeah, that's the monthly. That's where we're currently sitting on the monthly. So it's not like, you know, it won't really affect today's charts or today's analysis. But it's something you want to keep in the back of your mind, because you want to refer to that as you're trading along this month, right? You always want to have the bigger picture and understand what the bigger picture is in the monthly, because you could get lost in the small time frame analysis, right? So that's the monthly. Now the weekly, it shows you that like we currently are in this range here. So like you can kind of see, we started to form some type of resistance here to the left, right? So there's a resistance being printed here. There's a support being printed here. Like this is the range that you're currently like I'll say sitting in right now, from 2080 to 2000. And there's like not much info you can really get away from, take away from this, to be honest. Like I would assume that like if we're closing bearish here at resistance, that the rest of the weekly candle will continue to push further down towards the bottom of the next range. However, any given point, it could still flip, right? Because there's levels on the way down as well that price may reject off of, which we mentioned yesterday. There's a level right here. There's a level like down here. There's a level down here, obviously, right? And it looks like we rejected off the first level. So could this be the bottom wick for the weekly? Of course it can. And if it is, great. We'll flip and we'll look for positions to drive up towards the flip area, which is 2046. That flips, you're assuming it's going to tap 2062, etc. Right? So you have some range to drive. Let's see how the daily looks. Overall, the weekly looks like it is in that range, and I would assume that it will come down or I'll assume that it, you know, that could potentially be the bottom wick for the monthly to drive, right? I think the daily in this case shows me that we're bearish as well. So it's kind of great to see. It looks like, wow, it's interesting, because at some given point, I guess you close above here, right? And then you kind of close back into the range, or maybe this is the resistance all along and I never did close above. But that's fine, whatever the case may be. You did close bearish at resistance here, which is a great thing. And if that's the case, then your next support is like down here at the bottom of the range, which is 2020, right? So this is the range you're currently sitting in on the weekly, or on the daily, sorry. And if this is what's happening, you could probably say that like the weekly, because I didn't see the daily till now, but like if this is how the daily looks, right, and it shows us that like we're bearish right now, and you're assuming that the daily should continue to fall or drive further down towards the next support, then what you could say, going back to the weekly and monthly, is that maybe that wasn't the bottom wick. Because if you're flipping today on the daily, you're going to come down to fill the wick down, right? Which means that you're going to tap 2020, which means that you're re-breaking the lows from yesterday's low. Therefore, you're re-breaking the monthly, and you're re-breaking the weekly low at the same given time if that were to happen, right? So that if you were to drop down today, then you can assume that, you know, the monthly and the weekly isn't ready to flip yet. Maybe it's going to come down towards the actual bottom of the range, which is 2002, right? So the only thing about the daily today is there's no top wick. So that's why it's a little hard today, I'll say. The hardest part of today's analysis will be trying to figure out if that is enough, if the daily has a top wick or not. Because yes, what you would assume off of like standard is looking at this is you would assume that this is the top of the range, this is the bottom of the range. If that's the case, I would assume you'll drive down towards the bottom of the range like this, right? But the issue here is that there's no top wick here, which means that like when there's no top wick, I would assume you'll come up to create a top wick first, right? So will you continue to push further up to create a steeper top wick, or will you just flip bearish and drive? The good thing about this is that you don't have to take buys going up towards the top wick area. You can just take sells coming down, right? And usually I would be in a position to be like, okay, chat, you know, we can look for buys going up to create a top wick, but I don't think I'll be doing that today. I think today I'm gonna play a bit more, I'll say, not safe, but like a bit more with the structure, just because the last thing I want to do is get caught up in looking for buys with the top wick when I can just wait for the sells down after the flip anyways, right? The flip gives you that range regardless, so why not just wait for the flip down? So that's probably what we'll do here. Don't quote me on that though. We could change that during the session as new things are being printed, you know, as we have a new 4 close, whatever the case may be. We could present, it could present with more opportunities. As of right now, I'll say I'm very interested in the flip down on the daily, which is going to be around 2027, right? I think that's where you flip at. So let's go ahead and mark that up just to see where that is. 2027.799. Yeah, it's gonna be around these areas to the left here. So let's drop down to the smaller time frame again. Let's drop down to the 4 and see what's happening here. I think you have you had the comics open maybe like 5 minutes ago, right? Or 10 minutes ago, 7 minutes ago. The 4-hour candle is starting to come down. You have 30-minute closure in about 2 minutes, so that's cool. I mean, the thing is, like, these are all like bullish poles here, right? Like these are all bullish poles going up, so the structure is still bullish. Obviously, I'm afraid that any given point this could be a bottom wick for us to flip. Any given point that could still happen, so I wouldn't be taking sells obviously just because you're flipping on a daily. Like if for instance, if this kind of were to come down like this, right, I think the day flip sits you around like this area to the left here. I wouldn't just take my sells there on the flip, because any given point, this 1 hour and this 4 could just create a bottom wick for us to flip bullish, because again, we still have bullish structure here. These are still bullish candles going up, right? So taking sells down right now would be a little difficult, I'll say, a little tricky, because you're trying to figure out whether or not that's a top wick. However, what you could do for sells is if you drop down to the 30 to 1, you already notice there's no top wicks on the opening of the candles. So I would assume that, like, okay, if you get 30-minute closure like this, the way we look right now, this is the top of the range here. We're sitting at a resistance right around here at 2038, I think, or 2038.850, I'll say. That's a pretty decent zone there. So this is my resistance on price right now, right? And then my next support on price would probably be right around, I'll say, here at 2030.068. All right, so this will be my next like support. I'll say this is the range we're currently sitting in. So yeah, I'll say anything below 2029 would be great for sells down. I think that sits at the day flip as well, or near the day flip at least. So sells there would be great. However, the problem is that we're trying to figure out whether or not this is a top wick. So if you can get a closure like this on a 30-minute time frame in about a minute and a half here, and then the next 30-minute candle kind of comes up to create a top wick before coming down, that'll be the sells we'll grab. So we can grab, I wouldn't say wick entry sells, no, because again, the 1 hour, look at the 1, look at the 4, they're still heavily bullish. Any given point, you can still flip. I think this is where the bullish channel flip is actually. So taking a wick entry sell there is very difficult. You don't want to do that. However, if it were to come up to create a top wick and it were to flip bearish, that would be the sells I'll take. Because if you come up to break the highs, you're assuming that that's enough for you to make a new high on the 4 and the daily and the 1. However, if that doesn't form, then there's no reason as to why price would have done that if it didn't want to drive down, right? So if that were to happen, I wouldn't take the wick entry here. No, I wouldn't take anything here. I'll take what here is, the flip, and then the flip down towards 2029. That'd be great. So yeah, that's what I'll wait for next probably. Just because I need to confirm whether or not this is like the daily top wick, right? So if you come up again, you're also re-breaking the daily highs. And then if you do end up flipping bearish, you know, on the 30-minute time frame, that'll lead you to coming down towards 2029, which then leads you towards the daily flip at 2028. And then eventually, you know, you continue to drive with the daily down towards the wick fill on the daily, because that was the original idea today, right? So you see how, like, I mentioned, like, the problem today was just trying to figure out what this is up here, and whether or not that's a top wick, right? So you see how we're using the small time frame to confirm top wicks, to confirm that we're not going to come up to rebreak the sides, etc., right? That's kind of what we did there with the analysis today. So now that we have an idea as to what we could be waiting for and what confirms what, we have a much better direction, better idea today on price. So that's why I'm taking sells once all that forms. If that doesn't form, then so be it. I'm not taking anything today, right? And obviously for buys too, buys any given point could come into play, but I don't think we'll have buys. And if anything,